Hi, Lisa Gifford here, and today we're going to go over making the 3D mask using the Martelli templates. Martelli has three sizes that you can use to make the 3D mask. We have the 11 by 8.5, which we're calling this our extra large. We have the 10 by 7.5, this is the large size, and then we also have a small, which is 6.5 by 9. I've got different masks laying out here to show you the different sizes and then how you can tweak them just a little bit for people that you might be making them for by using the different lengths of your elastic. So what you're going to need to make this project is you're going to need the Martelli templates. You're going to need some elastic. Today I'm actually using a t-shirt fabric or a 4-way stretch material that you can cut into 1-inch strips. You're going to need some scissors, the rotary cutter. You're going to need some fabric. It depends on how much you're going to be needing. I would say at least a fat quarter to make a couple of masks. I'm still a big believer in using regular 100% quilting cotton. Plus I like using a batik for the back side. Sewing machine and iron will be very helpful. When you get the template, it's going to come with written instructions. So I'm going to go over a couple of the different ways to make them. We've got the instructions that come with the pattern. Plus I've done a couple of different versions that I tweaked it just a little bit. So we'll go over all of that also. All right, so we're going to go over the three sizes. The small, which is the 6.5 by 9. It fits a young adult or a child. You can change it up a little bit for fitting a child by just whatever length that you would put on for your elastic. With this one here, I'm using a 5-inch piece of the t-shirt fabric that's been stretched, and I've sewed it together right here. And a little bit later in the show, we'll have somebody here who will be demoing for it, and I believe it's going to be little Aiden. This one here, the large, this fits most adults. These here I've done with a 6-inch piece of the fabric. The instructions I think actually calls for if you're going to use elastic, whether it's round or flat, about 6.5 to 7-inch piece. But this t-shirt fabric's pretty stretchy. So this one here fits most adults, but there's a way to tweak that because I have some guys that can't fit that size. That 6-inch elastic was too small. So here I have one that's made with the large template, but I got a 7-inch piece, so it fits guys a little bit better, or somebody might have a longer back for their ears. So I've got several of them here, and I'm going to have Ryan up here. He's going to show you how the 7-inch elastic worked very well for him. I've also got a 6.5, which also works. So you'll just have to play with what different sizes of elastic that you'll use to be able to fit the person that you're wanting to make these for. And then we've got the extra large that we just are introducing today. So this one here is like a 1/2 inch bigger on both sides and then a 1/2 inch bigger. So we increased it by 1 inch all the way around. And this one here is showing it with that larger size, but I stuck with the 6-inch on the elastic on here because it brings it back further, so we want to be able for them to fit. And I've got Valerie's husband's going to be up here in a little bit, and he's going to show how well this one fits him. So those are the three different sizes and how you can tweak them up just a little bit by using whatever length of elastic that you're going to be using onto your mask. And then I'm going to go over a little bit about the instructions. I've actually got a sample here of the two different ways and why I think mine is just a little bit different. It's not as detailed, but we'll go over that in just a minute. So we're going to start off, and I'm going to make the 10 by 7.5, which is the large size. And I want to show how we've actually highlighted here. When you get the template, it's not highlighted. So grab one of our Martelli new metallic pens and be sure to fill it in, and then you'll know exactly what you're looking at here because they're very similar in sizes. They just change by a little bit, but if you mark it, you'll be able to know which one you're working with. So I'm going to be doing the large today. And I've just got 2 pieces of fabric here. So I'm going to make this little, make sure it's fits on here pretty good, so it's going to go this way. So what I'm doing is if I'm going to just do a single mask, I'm going to go ahead and have my fabric laid out, and I'm going to have it right sides together. Because the first thing you're going to do is you're going to sew the two pieces together and then flip them out. So I'll show the two different ways that I've seen it done in the instructions. So I've got it laid on here the way I want it, and now I'm just going to go ahead and trim it all the way around. And that's what makes our Martelli template so amazing, because it's got that get a grip on here. Holds everything in place as you're going around. So I've got my two pieces cut out right sides together. Now here's where the two difference in the directions are. What I like to do is I like to leave a 2-inch opening, and I like starting here, back tack, and I'll sew all the way around, and then I'll flip it out through the opening, press out my corners, and then finish it from there. But we'll stop right there. We sew all the way around. The instructions have you taking the two pieces. So say here's my two pieces right sides together, and they just have you sewing 3 sides here and here, leaving the sides opening, and then you flip them out. And I've done that with this one here. So I'm going to talk about the two differences in the written instructions to how I found it was a little bit easier to do it this way. But they have it where you have raw edges here, and what you're going to do is you're going to fold it over, but we'll get to that in a minute. So right now we're going to go ahead and take the one I'm working on, and we're going to go to the sewing machine, and I'm going to sew all the way around, leaving a 2-inch opening, and I'm doing that with a 1/4-inch seam. When I get done sewing, I like to trim off my corners, but if you're doing a lot of them, like if you're chain piecing, I wouldn't worry about that. Just go ahead and flip it out, because it's just extra time if you're having to make a bunch of them. But we'll go ahead and get this sewing machine, get this sewed up. All right, so I got my machine set up to do a 1/4 inch, and I've got it at a 1.8 stitch length, and we're going to go ahead and back tack and go all the way around, and then stop and leave a 2-inch opening. So after I get that all done, if I'm just making a couple, it doesn't hurt to just go ahead and trim off a little bit of this extra bulk right here, so you can have nice sharp points, but it's not necessary. But I like to do that if I have the time to just kind of get some of this extra bulk. So you got like 8 of these to trim around. Just be sure not to cut into your stitches. That would not be good. And then find your opening and just go ahead and flip it out and push out all of your corners. And then we're going to take it to the iron, and we're going to go ahead and give it a good press. Making sure all of these points are all pushed all the way out, because the next step is we're going to do a little top stitch. So now we're going to go ahead and get our pressing done so that we can do our top stitching. I went ahead and I've got my seams kind of pressed in and I've got it all laid out. So now I just go ahead and hit it really good. It gets everything all nice and flat for doing your top stitching. And I'll do it on both sides. Here's where a little bit of the variance in the two of the written instructions to what I do is going to be. I'm getting this a little bit better right here, kind of pushed out a little bit. In your written instructions, after you flip it out and you had the raw edges on the written instructions and you flipped it all the way out, then it has you top stitching these three sides right here and then here. So you're doing like 1/8 of an inch all these three edges. I've even seen where you can go all the way around and you could top stitch it here. But I feel that that's not really, I think it's a little bit more than what you actually need to do. I think the ones that I do, I only top stitch the long side here and the long side here. Because when I go to sew my strap in, that final edge right here is going to be tucked away, and this is actually going to be top stitched when I do this part right here, and you'll see that as we get further. So while I'm here at the ironing board and getting ready to do my sewing, so I've got it pressed, but I go ahead and find these 2 points here and these 2 corners right here. I go ahead and I want this to be the outside, so I flip it over and I'm going to go ahead and do a pressing here. So I've got it set right like this, and I'm just going to go ahead and press all the way that side. And then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do the other side. Now this is what I do with the large. Now the extra large allows you to do an extra step in being able to adjust the face mask a little bit. It's a lot bigger, so I'm going to pull this in so you can see. It's a lot bigger. So this here, we've got 7.5 inches. This is 8.5 inches. So it's a lot bigger on the face. So you can adjust it a little bit if you feel it might need to be brought down just a little bit. Instead of being right there on those corners, you could bring it over like 1/4 of an inch down a little bit and then sew a bigger bite right here instead of 1/8 of an inch, maybe more like, 3/16 of an inch, make it just a little bit wider if 8.5 inches will be too much. So you'll see when I'll show you Brian when he comes up here and he wears one of them. It was too big for the width, for the length. So when I guess that's the width. So when I just brought it in just a little bit, it fit him perfectly. So there's a little bit of tweaking that you can do on it. You can't make it bigger, but you can make it just a little bit smaller. So I just go ahead and get the press here because this is all the pressing that you're going to be doing. The next step is just taking it to the sewing machine, do your top stitch here, do your top stitch here, and since you already got this folded over, go ahead and get your stitch done here and your stitch done here. And then the next step will be putting on your elastic. On this one, the instructions, it has you doing all 3 sides, sewing it all right here, and then also doing that stitch here. Then you've got the raw edges that you've got to work with, like this right here. So then you have to fold it over. So you have these tucked in, then you fold it over, and you have to almost fold it over twice with your elastic in there, or threading your elastic through, then still pulling this back and this one back and doing another stitch. I'm going to show you how you don't have to do all of this extra stitching right here to make the mask, but to be able to just do it quickly by just after these are folded and sewn, you're just going to pull this back and you'll see. We'll get to that step when we get to the sewing machine. Okay, so right now I'm just going to go ahead and do my top stitch on the top and the bottom on the long seam. Make sure your seam is all tucked in there. And you don't need to back tack it, just sew straight across. So that's all I had to do right here. So we had pressed it, so now we can go ahead and do the rest of our sewing right here. Now this is where I want to show the differences when I'm working with the large template versus the extra large template if you need to bring it in just a little bit more. I'm just going to sew this right here like I did on this one by about 1/8 of an inch. But if you look at this one, if you can get in there and see this, Zeke, this one is done almost at 1/4, but not quite 1/4 of an inch. So it's a little bit of a deeper bite, so it wasn't quite as wide, up and down the face, but it still gives you that really nice seam here, which helps in holding the mask out from your face. So I only did that with this one. It might be something that you might, if you're working with a young adult who maybe the smaller size is too small, but the bigger sizes like the large might be just a little bit big, then if you just bring in this stitch right here just a little bit more, it might make it to be more for the size for their face. So you might have to tweak it a little bit, but generally this right here works for most people. So now I'm going to take my piece that I'm working on and I'm just going to do my stitch all the way across. And again, you don't need to back tack on this because it's going to be taken in on the next seam. Okay, so that's it sewn all the way across on both sides. Now going to the other one, if I had the raw edges, I'd be having to now fold it over, fold this back, pin it in place with my elastic already in there. But I find if I do it this way, it's just a little bit quicker. If you see right here, I'm going to be sewing like this zigzag, like a Z here, going down, coming back up, and sewing back down. And it's going to catch my elastic or my cord here because you kind of create a little pocket right here. So let me get some of that stretchy fabric real quick. Right, so this is a piece of like the 4-way stretch fabric or like t-shirt fabric. And I just cut long strips of it and I've given it a good pull so that it all curls in on itself. And I'm just needing to cut a 6-inch piece. I'm doing 6 inches for this one. So I just need 2 pieces that are 6 inches. My machine actually has a 6-inch mark on it. So I'm going to go ahead and get these even. Get the 6 inches. Mark it and cut it off right there. So they're both the exact same size. So here's how I put this together. So I got it, the long piece down, and I got my flaps right here. And I'm going to take my little piece that I just cut, and I'm going to take one end and I'm just going to tuck it in right here, underneath here. Let me get back to you. Can you see that right there? So it's in that spot. Now you can clip it or you can pin it. Then I'm going to take this edge right here and I'm going to bring it up to that seam or right there to the edge. And it's kind of creating like a Z right here or an inverted N. And I'm going to start sewing right here and I'm going to back tack and I'm going to come down and then I'm going to pivot. I'm going to come follow this seam up. I'm going to be sewing right here onto this. It's going to catch my elastic or my cord that I'm using here. It's going to catch it there. Come to this point right here, pivot again. Now I'm going to come back down and I'm going to back tack over the elastic. You You don't need to because it kind of catches it in two places, but I just give it a good back tack here. And before I get down about to the halfway point, or I'm going to go ahead and grab the other side, and I'm going to tuck it under here, create that little pocket again. I have it tucked in. Now I'm going to continue on sewing to here. Back tack. I'm going to get to this point right here. I'm going to pivot again. And I'm going to sew a couple of stitches. And then I'm going to bring this corner right here, this one here, and I'm going to bring it back just like I did the first one. What I am looking for is for this edge right here to be parallel with this edge right here. Do you see how it's kind of parallel? It's like making a Z or an N, but you've got this edge here parallel with this edge here. So I come up, I get my needle to about right here, pivot again, come back down. When I get to the end, I back tack it and then cut my threads, and then I do the other side the exact same way. So again, looking at it on this end, start, get your in the pocket, down, up, down, back tack, pivot, up, pivot, down, back tack. I think I have it under there about 1/2 of an inch. So when I get started, I just kind of give it a pinch, bring it over here to the machine. I've got my needle centered in the center. And I start back with a back tack. And I'm coming down to that point. And then I'm going to pivot. Now you're going through quite a few layers here. So this might be where you might need to have a more heavy duty needle. Like with Janome, we go by a number. So like a 12 or a 14. I think a 9, a thinner needle would be just a little bit too much for it. So now I'm coming up to where I'm catching the strap at the very first. And now I'm going to go ahead and pivot. And I'm going to back tack over top of the strap. Coming all the way down. Now I'm making sure that my strap is in that little pocket again. Folding it over, coming down, back tacking. Pivot. Now before I fold it back, I let my machine do a couple of stitches. Just get it past the elastic, and then I go ahead and grab that corner right here. It was the corner that was right here, and I fold it back. Making sure that I've got the 2 parallel lines stitched to the fold. Pivot. Making sure everything is parallel. And then sew the rest of the way down. Back tack and cut my threads. And that's what I was looking to do. And it kind of makes this little pattern on the back side. I don't know if you can see that, Zeke. You've got where you start, pivot, edge, coming down, pivot, point, pivot, down, cut your threads. I just found this was just a little bit easier than having to take this edge and fold it over. Like if I did the other way, I'm folding this over almost twice to completely encase it, and then I'm having to pin, fold this back, and then I'm having to do like extra stitching. So it just seemed to go by a little bit quicker by taking out some of those extra steps, not having to do top stitching all around. Because if you notice, if I would have top stitched this, then I would have had an extra row of stitching here, because this becomes a top stitch right here. I didn't top stitch that to begin with. So it kind of does that top stitching. So I'm going to go ahead and get this other side done. Again, I'm making sure that this is parallel with this edge right here. I got my strap in that little pocket. bringing it to the machine. I start by doing a little back tack right here, going down to the point, pivot, following that up, pivot, go over that strap, coming down a little bit, getting my next piece in there, putting it in the pocket. Back tack over the strap, get to the fabric, pivot. I'll sew a couple of stitches before I fold it back. Now I grab that corner and I'm folding it back and making it parallel, proceeding forward till I get to that corner. Pivot, and then I'm going to be sewing it off to the end. And let me tell you, all those little beepings that you're hearing is because it's a machine I'm not used to. I'm used to a machine that automatically raises its foot. This one doesn't like to do that. I have to do it manually. So it keeps letting me know that it doesn't do that. All right, so then I'm going to go ahead and get my threads all clipped. And it just creates this little pattern right here and you don't even see it. And so that is your mask. All right, so here we are. I'm showing you the 3 different sizes on our models. I've got Ryan, Aiden, and Brian, and I know you all have seen them. So Ryan right here is showing the medium. This was the sample that I had made today, which is a 10 by 7.5. For me, it works if I use a 6-inch elastic on here. Didn't fit him so well, did it? It just was too tight. So he's got the 7-inch in there, and if you can see, it fits perfectly. No gapping here, no gapping here, no gapping here. So that's where this one worked very well for most adults. And again, I talked to you about how you could tweak it a little bit if it's a little bit too big, like I did with Brian's here. We brought it up a bigger size. This is the 11 by 8.5. When I made it just how we've done all of them before, it was too big here. So by bringing it in a little bit right here, instead of that 1/8 of an inch, but more like a 3/16 of an inch, it made it so now it fit him well here. And because it brings it back a 1/2 inch more on each side, I only needed to use the 6-inch cord for it to fit. And that fits pretty good, don't it? Covers up here and under here, and nice coverage right here on the side. Now little Aiden, he's got the small. And it is 6.5 by 9, and it is just perfect on him. And I only used a 5-inch cord on his. And if you had somebody who was a little bit smaller, you could probably go with maybe a 4 or 4.5. And if you needed to make it smaller in the bite here, that would be one of those things where you could take it in not just an 1/8 of an inch, but maybe 3/16 of an inch. And it would bring it in just a little bit more if it needed to be brought in. So this is where I wanted you to show you how, even though these are a set template, you can adjust the size a little bit by just using your seam and by just changing the length of your cord. Be sure to check us out at martellinotions.com. If you have any questions, you can also email me at my email address. It is quiltingwithlisa@gmail.com. Email me if you have any questions and I'll be glad to get back with you. Again, check us out at martellinotions.com and pick these up. You're absolutely going to love them. Bye-bye.